Hello and welcome to Nugget Shooter Journals. My name is Bill Southern, and today we're going to talk a little bit about how I got into nugget shooting and just about gold nugget hunting with a metal detector in general. I started out just like probably most of you have, and I went through all the frustrations. Geez, I think it was like a whole year before I got my first nugget out of my own dry wash tailings. And I think I've told that story before, so I won't bore you with it. But yeah, I found my first nugget right on top of my own dry washer header pile. And I learned at that point that gold fell off dry washers. And that's the direction I took from there, as I was hunting dry washer tails and following where the dry washers went. And a good friend of mine, Jim Strait, who was gone now, I miss him, and he wrote a book called Follow the Dry Washers years and years and years ago. I think he did like 7 or 8 different versions of that book and adding more to it every time as technology changed and whatnot. An excellent book for people starting out, and it teaches you an awful lot. When I first started out, I got interested in nugget shooting, watching television of all things. Buzzard Massey from the GPAA was on Gold Fever television, and I just happened to catch it by accident. And it was an episode, and they were out in Alaska somewhere, and had I believe it was an old Fisher Gold Bug. Maybe not. I'm not really sure on what detector it was. But he was detecting on tailings piles in Alaska and pulled out a nugget about the size of a marble, shooter marble. And boy, that caught my attention. And I already messed around a little bit with dry washing and a little bit of sluicing here and there. And I had a friend who had a dredge. So I was already interested in gold. And I decided I wanted to be a nugget shooter. Okay, so a friend of mine had an old metal detector. I don't think there was even a brand name on this thing. It was like a kid's toy. And I took that darn thing out in the desert, and it heard everything, every rock, every bush, every tree. I didn't know how to set it up. I had no instructions. So I got really frustrated really fast. And I'd always go back to dry washing because I could always get a little bit of gold. And after that, I got a whites, and I never found any gold with that one. And it was always the same thing. I'd go hunt and wouldn't find anything, get frustrated, and go back to dry washing. And it was simply I wasn't doing it right. I hadn't learned what to do with the metal detector. I learned how to make the metal detector work pretty good. I had no idea that I had to keep the ground stable. I had no idea that it was up to me to make that metal detector find gold. I was under the impression a lot of people are under when they first buy one that, hey, you just walk out anywhere, you're going to find gold. And that's not the case. I found that out very quickly. But I did learn for Arizona and desert hunting, which is way different than being in Alaska or Northern California, other places. Here we're on the bones of the earth. I mean, in most places in the lower areas, in the deserts, it is literally the bones of the earth. And there's very little dirt on top in a lot of places. Some places there is. And the places where there's not, it's a whole lot easier. And you're able to see contact zones. You're able to look at the rocks on the ground. And you don't have all that overburden over the top. So you're able to get pretty darn good depth up here in most places. You go a place like Northern California in a pine forest or Alaska, you've got overburden there consisting of organic materials that takes away a lot of the depth your detector is able to achieve. But I hunt the desert. That's where I prefer to hunt, and that's where I probably spend 85% of my time is hunting desert. And I just prefer it. I understand it. I really enjoy the desert, and it's just where I prefer to hunt. So I guess it's kind of, I don't like having to deal with all the extra overburden is a big part of it. But also I live here in the desert, so that's a big part of it. And I got tired of dry washing when I actually started finding gold nuggets. And like I said, it was in tailings piles. And I read Jim Strait's book after meeting him. And I was really gung-ho to learn how to dry wash. Or I'm sorry, to learn how to metal detect. And it took a few people telling me I was doing it wrong, and they're able to do it without making me upset. And I was able to look at myself and go, you know what, they're right, you are doing this wrong. And I didn't realize how much work it was. I didn't realize that I had picked the hardest part of gold prospecting and decided that's what I wanted to do. Yes, metal detecting is probably the hardest part of this hobby or this business. Simply because you're out there with a piece of plastic yay big to yay big, or bigger in some cases, or smaller in some cases, but you're out there trying to find a needle in a haystack with that little bitty piece of plastic. And I've always been amused of, we have outings and stuff, and some of the newer guys, and I'm not making fun of them by any means here, but they'll come up to me and they'll go, well, excuse me, well, this area looks pretty well gone over. And he goes, where would you hunt? And usually I'm out showing them something. I say, well, I'd hunt right here. Well, there's been 1,000 people here. Well, maybe there has been 1,000 people there, but I can still find gold there. No, it doesn't grow back. Once it's gone, it's gone. But everybody hunts differently. We all have a different technique. And some people just aren't patient enough to actually do what it takes to find gold. And we dig a lot of trash, guys. I mean, a lot of trash. And if you're into coin relic hunting at all, digging the trash can be kind of fun, because you can try to figure out what you've dug, what they used it for. I mean, it is amazing what some of these miners did out there in the deserts and what they used car parts for. I mean, these guys would literally drive a car out into the desert to their placer claim, dismantle it, use the engine, use the transmission, use all the parts, punch holes in the old fenders, make them into classifiers and grizzlies. And it's amazing some of the stuff we find out there in the desert. But metal detecting is the hardest part of this whole hobby. Number one, you have to find places with nuggets. And number two, you have to have the patience to find the nuggets once you get there. And one thing I've learned over the years of doing this is when you first get to a spot, you may find gold that first trip out there, but a lot of times for me, I don't. It takes me a while to walk around, look at the land, get the lay of the land, figure out where the gold might be, look for evidence the old timers were there. And that includes dry wash piles. They're one of my favorite ways to find places to hunt nuggets. But there's other ways that they handled these washes back in the old days. They would winnow, and that's where 2 guys or maybe 4 guys got on the corners of a blanket, and they would throw the dirt up and down, up and down, up and down, get the heavies to the bottom, then peel up the stuff on top, throw it up on the banks, and just keep doing that. And they'd pick the gold they could see out of it and get the classified material off the bottom so they could pan it or whatever they were going to do with it, and the rest would get thrown right up on the bank. And a lot of times big nuggets got thrown up on those banks. And I've found some of my biggest nuggets just laying on a bank where it got thrown up there years ago. And those old timers, they were not able to come home and sit around and have a soda or a beer and watch football after they hunted all day and have supper. They had to either find gold or they didn't eat unless they could find something to shoot out there. And it was a rough life, a very rough life. So what I'm getting at there is, so they knew they were throwing gold away. That would be kind of like if I put you in a wash and said, okay, you're going to get 10 ounces a day out of this wash, but you got to throw 3 ounces back. Sounds kind of odd, right? Well, it is. But that's essentially what they were doing. They knew they were going to lose some gold when they were working these washes. They didn't care because they were getting a high enough percentage for it to pay, feed them, and make a little money to put in their poke and maybe send back home to the family. In some cases, get rich. That's why I like following people that did dry wash work in the deserts. There's no water, okay? When they don't have water to classify stuff, they lose a lot of gold. Dry washers are quite inefficient, and they can lose, depending on the material, the guy running it, the angle he's got his dry washer, how experienced he is, they can lose up to 30-40% of the gold they find. And if you look back at some of my videos, you'll see me find a lot of gold in old dry washer tailings, and I still do to this day. And that's one of my best indicators. I'll even go up on a hill with a pair of binoculars and I'll look for dry wash tailings or evidence of old trails or something along those lines from a very high point and look at the lowland below me, and then I go down there and hunt. And I've been very, very successful doing that. Okay, back to the hardest part. Metal detecting is the hardest part. You have to be very patient. We spend a lot of time digging garbage, a lot of time not finding anything. But when we do get into something, it can be quite substantial. And for me, hiking the desert and metal detecting, not having all the noise of an engine or other things running, is just a really peaceful experience for me, and I enjoy it immensely. And probably that's one of the things that drew me to metal detecting other than finding big nuggets. Back in the old days, big nuggets were common. By big nuggets, I'm saying 1/4 ounce and up. They were pretty common, even out here in San Domingo and other places. Sunbakers were common. You'd get a signal and it'd sound like trash. You look down, there'd be a nugget laying on top of the ground. And we're talking probably close to 30 years ago. So there's been an awful lot of people hunting these areas in those 30 years, let me tell you. And a lot of the easy stuff is gone now. There's still some out there, but you got to really hike in to get it. Quads changed everything. They got people back in farther without having to hike or beat up their vehicle. And there's still a lot of places quads can't go. And some of the places I hunt, you have to park and walk a mile, maybe 2 miles in, just to get into the spots where the gold still is, because all the stuff close to the roads has been hammered and hammered and hammered again. But still, every time it rains real hard, you can go out there and possibly squeak a little nugget or two out. And technology's changed a lot for us over the last 30 years. And we've gone from machines that were very hard to keep stable and noisy and all over the place to machines that run almost perfectly smooth and can hear a piece of gold so small you got to wet your finger to pick it up out of the scoop. It's amazing to me. And now we have machines that will go so deep that you can get deeper than the last guy in that area, and maybe you get a big nugget that was missed. Sad part is you got to dig deep trash too, but that's part of the game, like I said. Again, it's the hardest part of the hobby because you do have to learn a little bit of geology as well. And I don't pretend to be a geologist. My good friend Chris Ralph, I call him up quite often, and he has a YouTube channel too, by the way. Professional prospector Chris Ralph. And if you're not subscribed, you probably ought to go there. But I'll call up geologists and ask them when I'm confused. But I also carry a streak plate, a piece of unglazed porcelain, and I carry a book with me on the quad or in the truck so I can look stuff up. And in my area, we really like to see rhyolite, which is an extrusive. It was lava at one time, and it cooled pretty fast, so there's no big crystals in it. It's fine-grained. And where it's up against or contacting schist, which is a metamorphic rock, it was probably shale or mudstone or slate or something along those lines that was changed by heat and pressure. Where those two materials contact here in Arizona and other places in the desert, that's where the old timers went, that's where the new timers went, and that's where I go. Those type of areas were perfect for producing gold, and they did. And in some places they produced a lot of gold. Okay, now here's where it gets good for the guy with the metal detector. A lot of people don't realize that we get to hunt the hillsides, and we get to pick on those hillsides, where the old timers and stuff like that, they had to hunt in the washes where the gold was concentrated by nature. Otherwise, you can't shovel a whole hillside through a dry washer for just a few nuggets. Well, I can spend an afternoon walking that hillside, overlapping my swings carefully, thoroughly hunting it, and get a nice handful of gold sometimes. And that's one of the big advantages of metal detectors, and that's what drew me to it. And a lot of times there can be some nice pockets or a little area, a little dip coming down the hill that just happened to be right in line with a decomposing gold vein, and it just caught all that gold right there. And I found places like that. And over 30 years of doing that, I've learned to identify areas that are likely to have that type of gold. And that's why sometimes it looks so easy when we put these videos up, like we go out every time and find gold. And keeping it real is very important. And that's why I show a lot of videos where I don't find a darn thing. And I'm sure you can relate to that. And out of all the years that I've been metal detecting, I can't even count the number of times I've went home with no gold, but I always find metal. And I'm metal detecting, so I guess I always find something, right? I'm just kind of rambling today, and I guess because it's raining, and I just put the turkey in the oven. It's Thanksgiving Day here in the U.S., and we eat turkey and watch football and relax and be thankful for all the good things that have happened to us over the years. And I started here on YouTube June of 2018, I believe it was, June 5th or something like that. I had an account from 2014, but I only used it because when a new detector came out for one of the major manufacturers, I was testing it for them, and I had to send a video in to be analyzed about a problem the detector had. So anyway, I never put up another video until 2018. Now I try to get 1 or 2 up a week, usually 2. And I've learned a lot from other YouTubers as well. And one thing I always like to stress to you people is that never get blinded by thinking you're the best thing since peanut butter. I'm pretty darn good with a detector, and I can take whatever detector you own, and I can grab that thing and go out in the gold fields, and I'm pretty positive I'd find gold with it if it's a good quality gold detector. And by saying that, I'm also saying that I'm not here to sell you any one brand or anything like that. I'm here to open your eyes to what detectors can do, which ones work best for me, and show you how to find gold with it. There's so many different brands out there. There's so many different types, and it's up to you to learn yourself what works best for you. And sure, I could think, well, my way is the only way to do this. I'm finding gold. I don't need to listen to anybody else. Well, you know what? I learn an awful lot from other people on YouTube, from meeting them at my outings, from meeting them at my forums, to meeting them in the field. And I have learned so much. And even after 30 years, every now and then somebody will mention something, and I just kind of sit back and I think, why in the world didn't I ever pay attention to that before? And then I'll add that little bit of knowledge to my arsenal, and it pays off. And it pays off. And I guess this is kind of a pep talk, if you will. And I'm not here to show off my gold or anything like that, although I do show it as I find it. My whole purpose is to help others learn to enjoy the desert and this hobby and finding gold like I do. And it used to be I reached out through clubs by doing seminars at their meetings. And then I started working with the GPAA doing seminars. And I was able to reach out to a lot of people. I have a gold forum, and I had a blog at that time, and I write articles and stuff like that. But I still felt I wasn't reaching enough people. And I met a guy just by chance that came out here to do some metal detecting and looked me up after being advised by Mine Lab that I may be able to help out a little bit. The guy's name was Bo, and he goes by Aqua Chigger. And I had no clue who Aqua Chigger was at that time. This is way back in May of 2018, I think it was. And we went out and hunted, and he filmed the whole time, and I found it very interesting. And he looked at me when we were up in his truck talking. And when he's out in the field, he eats raw ramen soup, the square block with no seasoning. He's out there munching on his ramen soup. And he goes, "Why aren't you on YouTube?" And I said, it's kind of intimidating for one. And I said, "I'm a dork." And he looked at me kind of funny, and he goes, "Well, we've hunted most of the day, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, what do you think of me?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "What do you think of me?" You know, and I thought about it a minute, and I just looked at him and smiled a little bit, and I said, maybe I ought to try this. And he got a chuckle out of that, and so did I. But he was basically saying, be genuine, be the dork you are, be whoever you are. If you want to help people, offer them something that will work for them as well as it worked for you. So that's what I try to do. And I do the best I can to offer you a place to start, a place to learn, and something to grow from. And the main thing is to understand, no, the gold hasn't all been found. There's so much of it out there yet. It is amazing. People tell me all the time, there's no open ground yet left out there. Yes, there is. There's lots of open ground, but you have to find it. And that's where I come in. That's where Chris Ralph comes in. That's where Gordy Prospecting comes in. That's where 911 prospecting. That's where all these other prospecting videos and creators out there are trying to help you. They're trying to help you learn. And by learning, you gain the power to go out in an area and look around and go, I think I'm going to start right here. I have that power. And I still don't know everything there is to know. Keep an open mind and always learn. That's the most important. But having that power to go out and be confident that the spot you're in could hold gold is the key to this. If you go out there thinking you're not going to find gold, you don't find gold. If you go out thinking you're only going to find trash, you only find trash. You go out there thinking you're going to find gold, you may only find trash. But the next trip you might find gold. And that very first gold nugget, for me, opened my eyes, and I looked around and I said, I can do this. And I've been able to do it. And I found a lot of big gold in the old days. I still find big gold every now and then. A lot of small gold. The small gold we call bread and butter gold. It adds up, and that's the stuff that pays the bills. And I'm going to cut this one off because I think I've been rambling quite a while. I hope you enjoyed the video. And like I said, this one had no real direction. I'm just kind of in a chatty mood, so I'm chatting. And if you like this kind of stuff and you want to learn how to find gold and you can put up with me, I give some good information out. So like, subscribe, and ring that little bell down in the corner on the screen. And for now, Nugget Shooter out.